Well, and we're live. It is Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020, and it is an important day in the history of In Lieu of Fun. It is 6 months to the day, 180 days since fun stopped, and we had to start making plans in lieu of fun. That was 6 months ago to the day. 180 episodes of In Lieu of Fun. Since then, there has not been a single day when anyone has had any fun. There have been 180 days where we need, fun supplements, kind of like vitamins, dietary supplements. And we have been there for you. And today we have two really important announcements. In that time, by the way, 200,000 Americans have died. I don't want to make a joke about that, so I'm not going to. I just want to say, in lieu of fun, we have death. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was with us at the beginning of In Lieu of Fun, not with us at the end. John Lewis was with us at the beginning before In Lieu of Fun when we were still allowed to have fun. John Lewis and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now we're not allowed to have fun, John Lewis or Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or 200,000 other people. But we have really important good news announcements on the 180th day of In Lieu of Fun. We have, for example, high definition WITIS, which as of today, my audio visual upgrades are complete. My snazzy new, very fast computer arrived, and you will see I am not glitching anymore. The upgrades that began with my awesome internet speed have now been completed with my CPU speed and memory. I'm not going to be disappearing anymore. You're not going to hear echoing because my AirPods can't keep up with, or the computer can't keep up with my AirPod connection. So we've got high definition WITIS for In Lieu of Fun, and that's important because, that way you get the bad news faster. And Kate also has a very important announcement on the 180th day of In Lieu of Fun.
Yeah, my announcement is I got my In Lieu of Fun merch today. In lieu of fun, there is a murder hornet with baby Prosecco.
I just want to also point out, 180 days ago, there were no murder hornets known in the United States. This is a creature of this period. There weren't wildfires. There were no derechos in Iowa.
Like Superman.
But we didn't have In Lieu of Fun merch either. So it's a balance, 200,000 Americans.
It's pretty.
Or In Lieu of Fun merch. You get your choice.
Yes.
The good and the bad.
This is what you get in Trump's America. T-shirts with baby cannons, baby chipmunks, murder hornets, baby Prosecco, and no fun.
Yeah. So this is the trade-offs that we live with these days. You can have your fun, you can have live Americans. Great Americans can be living, if elderly and frail, or you can have the merch and high definition WITIS. I would say it's up to you, except the truth is it's not. We're not allowed to have fun anymore, but one thing we get in lieu of fun in the new America is to have a 5 o'clock drink every now and then with Sarah Longwell. Sarah Longwell, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Hi, Sarah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did you bring any funny news that I didn't get to hear yet today? I stayed away from my computer today just in case. I want to know. I'm like, have any other high profile Republicans been arrested for anything?
Yeah, because the last time you were here, Steve Bannon had just been arrested and Kate didn't know about it, right?
Yeah.
And you were wearing your like polo shirt or something, like your like little zippy hoodie thing. That was sick.
I was double pop collared because in homage to Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
Pour one out.
Oh, break really quickly before we get started. I want to say thank you to Michael Fromberger and John Bordeaux for putting together both. John commissioned the logo from an artist friend of his, Kevin Thorne, and it's pretty amazing. And he and Michael worked together to kind of put up the store and everything else. So thank you guys so much for doing that. It's really great.
And of course, all proceeds from the merch store will go to the World Central Kitchen. Kate and I will take none of it except the stuff we skim off the top after telling you we're going to use it to build the wall. The merch store link is in the Q&A, is in the comments. All right. So, Sarah, let's start with the important question here. There is a debate going on in the Never Trump community, and for those members of the audience who haven't followed this debate, it's actually pretty interesting. There are the pessimists like Sarah Longwell who say the Ruth Bader Ginsburg thing is really going to shake up the race, or could stand to shake up the race in Trump's favor. There are the stable, nothing can change anything, it's all baked in people. And then there is Rick Wilson, who went from one to the other and now thinks this is going to energize Biden and liberal voters. And so my question is, first of all, are you reevaluating your initial pessimism in light of the first few days' events following the advent of the events of the last few days, both on the Ruth Bader Ginsburg death, but also the decision by the majority and by the president to push aggressively? Or do you still think this is just what the doctor ordered for the president?
How do you even know what I think? What are you listening?
Because
to?
You were on the podcast with Charlie Sykes on Saturday morning, and you were rounding up the. I listened to you,
Sarah's
Sarah.
like, you have listening devices. Like,
well, I do a secret podcast with JVL where we've delved into this.
I know about the secret podcast, but I was talking about I go off the public record,
right?
Because these are things the audience can share. The secret podcast, by the way, is available to people who support the Bulwark, which you should all do, because then you get access to the secret podcast.
Yes.
What a good idea.
And if you listen to the secret podcast,
I love secrets.
You would know that I was reevaluating, when I did the emergency podcast on Saturday morning at like 8:30, I was still sort of just reeling from the news. And I think my initial reaction, and the reason that I was feeling sort of pessimistic about how it would change the macro political environment, is that if you're Donald Trump and you have been down in every single national poll for the last 8 months and you've just had relentless bad news, anything that changes the conversation away from COVID and your disastrous handling of COVID is a net benefit. 2, the conservatives, we have a culture of the courts among conservatives. And Ann Applebaum had a really good piece about this over the weekend, where she talks about when it starts to be about the courts, it tends to sort of send people into their ideological corners, right? And they dig in this way. And I also remembered the Kavanaugh fights, because the courts end up they split the Never Trump community between the people who, maybe are slightly more siding with Democrats versus people who are like, if I'm going to get anything out of Donald Trump, I want these Supreme Court justices, so give them to me, like a Matt Lewis or somebody like that. And so and part of the way that I always evaluate whether news is good or bad is that I think about it from Trump's perspective. Does Trump think this news is good or bad for him? Is he happy or sad that this happened? And I don't think you can say anything other than Republicans and Trump are very happy to have this fight right now to both chew up the airwaves in terms of what people are going to be talking about, an opportunity to energize their base in a way that it had not been generated. I mean, when you've got right track, wrong track numbers among your own people saying that, a majority of them think the country's going in the wrong direction or that things aren't good, something like this helps you. So that was my initial assessment.
But
well, and I don't know that I've changed quite that piece of the assessment. I think I was maybe overly bleak, though, in how it would actually impact the election. Because here's the part of what's happened in the last few days. Okay, so the question that I had was, so what's Trump gonna do with this seat? Does he dangle it to try to energize people and say you have to reelect me? If they jam it through, does that help him? Because I would argue that part of what's changed is I thought that he and Mitch McConnell would not be quite aligned, that Mitch McConnell would be jam this through and Trump would be like, I don't know, I think this kind of helps me if I say reelect me or you don't get this. And instead, what they decided to do, it's now clear, is like they're going to go for it, right? The whole thing is, and maybe part of the calculation there is Donald Trump would like a very favorable Supreme Court for himself if this election's very tight and it ends up in a 2000 where the Supreme Court ends up playing a decisive role. But anyway, so they're going to jam it through. Now, when you do something like that, and all of the polling that I've seen subsequently, like from Reuters, says that 63% of the public think that they should wait. And obviously, all of these Republicans are on the record from not that long ago saying this is something that you shouldn't do in an election year. So it's starting to look more like the public opinion environment sort of against them, but the constitutional environment favors them. So they're going to jam it through and say, and honestly, like their posture is just like a party that has lost everything, right? This is like their Hail Mary. We're about to lose the Senate. We're about to lose the election. And so like, this is the last thing we've got. So like, let's knock it out. And if people are mad at us for it, oh, well, and we lose the election, it was going that direction anyway. That's the posture I see. So I'm now more bullish on the idea that they will get it through and done. Before I was also like, that clock is ticking. Like that is a serious time crunch. There's only like 13 working days that the Senate has scheduled between now and election day. But they're going to make everybody come back, pull them off the trail. They're going to jam this through. And I don't think that creates a better environment for them electorally is where I've landed. I've netted out.
It's very Federalist Society. Like this I think that's kind of how I read it a little bit, is that there's just this long-term focus of like, well, if we're going to lose the executive, then at least we can keep winning in the courts, which has been, I think, really kind of the tactic of the Federalist Society for quite some time. I don't know, that's just that was like the way that you were describing it right now kind of reinforced that to me. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but
yeah, I think that's that's sort of what I'm saying is I think that they think that the courts are kind of the last bastion of the things that they're own. And Mitch McConnell basically seems ready to light the Senate chances potentially on fire in order to get this through.
But I think
why do you think that is a rational act on his part? Objectively, the difference between a 5-4 majority on the Supreme Court and a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court is less than the difference between controlling the Senate and not controlling the Senate. After all, controlling the Senate is controlling half of a branch of government, and the more powerful half at that, whereas controlling, having firmer control over the Supreme Court is, I wouldn't say it's 1/9 of a branch of government because this is a key vote, but it's not 1/3 of a branch of government. It's not, maybe it's 1/4. Why do you think it's a rational act on McConnell's part to bet the Senate on a Supreme Court seat?
Well, because the bet, it depends on how much he loses the Senate by, right? So,
and whether he would have lost it anyway, which is, of course, unknowable.
That's right. But see, that's my point is I think that they already think that Collins is gone. They already think McSally's gone. They already think Gardner's gone. And so now they're thinking, so they're looking at like a place like Iowa, okay, where Ernst is a little bit in trouble. Does this help or hurt Joni Ernst? Probably helps her in Iowa. And so like because that's the difference. Like, does it hurt or help Lindsey Graham, who's suddenly running neck and neck with Jamie Harrison?
I think it hurt. I got to say, I think it hurts Lindsey Graham.
Why? Tell me.
Because
Yeah, tell me. I agree with
because
Sarah.
think of all the ads that Jamie Harrison is going to run that says, here's Lindsey Graham in 2016, here's Lindsey Graham in 2018, here's Lindsey Graham today. How can you trust him?
Yeah, here's my counterpoint. Donald Trump is running, it's like +8 or something in South Carolina, which is not as good as he did in 2016, but it's still pretty strong for him. And I think that the reason that Lindsey Graham doesn't do as well is because people don't perceive him as being Trumpy enough. They think he's let the Russian hoaxsters run wild. And so people want to see the Lindsey Graham of the Kavanaugh hearings that's, yelling at people and saying, I won't let you get me Dems. And that's why he was on TV most recently, because he was on Fox News and he's like, Jamie Harrison's outspending me, contribute to my campaign. I won't be ruled by this mob. I won't be pushed around. Mitch McConnell won't be pushed around. Like, that's his play. That's what he thinks is going to help him.
But
yeah, I agree with Sarah 100%.
But I guess my question is, Jamie Harrison is outraising him in that context. And so I guess my question is, who is it energizing? When the world looks at Lindsey Graham right now, a lot of people are saying ugh and giving money to Jamie Harrison. It's just not clear to me that he is creating more. Now, I am deeply not in touch with the average South Carolina voter, white or black, by the way. This is just not not my mid-Atlantic urban socioeconomically advantaged cultural whatever milieu. That said, I don't see who has Lindsey Graham endeared himself to other than a certain group of, kind of MAGA uber alles kind of people.
Yeah, but that's who's going to vote in South Carolina. I mean, that's where the margins are in South Carolina. And look, here's another example. Just to, Mitch McConnell, Amy McGrath is raising ungodly sums of money, just ungodly. And everyone hates Mitch McConnell. His approval ratings are at 36% in Kentucky. He's going to win in Kentucky. People can stop sending money to Amy McGrath. It's nothing against her. She's not going to win that seat, and people should let it go. And they should spend money on Senate races that are winnable because she's just not going to pull it out. It's
if you were advising people, say 96 people who were live on Crowdcast and 120 or so who were live on YouTube, and all the other people who are going to watch this not live, what is the right, for your marginal dollar, you don't want to give to Kelly, who's pretty clearly going to win in Arizona, or to Sarah Gideon, looks like she's going to win in Maine. Where is your marginal dollar best spent in Senate races right now?
Look, I think that Lindsey Graham, that race is close enough, and Lindsey Graham is sort of vulnerable. I mean, when I see him on TV, he looks panicked to me, and I think that that's a perfectly good race to invest in. I would look at MJ Hager in Texas, who's only running 5 behind Cornyn in a race where Joe Biden's running even with Trump in Texas, which is one of the craziest things anybody's ever seen. And so I think that I don't remember what the last polling is for McGrath, but she's down, I think, by double digits. It's not close. Whereas MJ Hager's got a 5-point deficit, and she's basically unknown. And so that is a better, if I was just anything aside, just looking at things analytically there. And then the other thing is in Georgia. So Georgia's got 2 Senate races, and they've got this Dem that's hanging out that might cause real problems for the Dem who's doing much better. I forget his name. And then the other race that's interesting, right, that's not getting much attention at all, that's very interesting for the Supreme Court fight is Alaska, where Sullivan is looking like maybe in a dead heat. And he's just had the senior Republican senator just came out and said they didn't want to vote on this. And so that creates an interesting dynamic in Alaska that's not a very socially conservative state. And this is one of the things, too, about just analyzing the current environment as it relates to the Supreme Court. We don't know who the nominee is yet, right? Because if it is Amy Coney Barrett, who's the front runner right now, so lots of conservatives really like her. She's sort of a star in FedSoc world. She's very socially conservative. Alaska's not a very socially conservative state at all. Like that may play really well in Iowa and Midwestern states, may not play as well in places like Arizona, in places like Florida, in places like Alaska. So like, anyway, but your question about marginal dollar, those are some of the races I might take a look at.
What about Mississippi?
Yeah. That one like just popped recently.
It's just Mike Espy has not been on a lot of people's radar screens, but he's polling awfully well.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like at this point, I don't know off the top of my head where the fundraising is for every single one of these Senate candidates, but my guess is that like Amy Graff just like has enough money. Just like don't send her anymore and send it to Espy, send it to somebody who could do something with it, send it to MJ Hager who could do something with it. That's just like analytically that seems to make more sense. But like people get these people in their heads that they're like, I gotta beat Mitch McConnell or I'm excited about this person. And it doesn't necessarily, they're just like not gonna win.
Yeah. I'm still kind of wondering if they can make it happen in 13 working days. I'm a little uncertain. Do you think that they're going to be able to pull this off, Sarah? Is that like kind of like, I know that they're going to try. But I'm kind of curious if like you think it's.
Yeah. So I'll say one other thing about the dynamics. So I think, can they do it? Maybe, but they have no room for error. There's zero margin for error. So like anything, but this is where this brinksmanship to me gets interesting for the political dynamic. So one of the things that has got to be in Mitch McConnell's head is that, and it's already out there, you can see it, is that when you push Dems, right? So they're really upset about this. So then they start talking about things like court packing, eliminating the filibuster. And I don't know on a real voter, thing, whether or not like people are really wrapped up in court packing and the filibuster. That being said, I'm sure Fox News is talking about nothing. Despite the fact that Joe Biden has absolutely said he doesn't want to pack the courts, absolutely said he wants to maintain the filibuster, they're going to talk about Dems doing those things. And so Mitch McConnell is also thinking like, can you change the political environment with this fight? If Dems try to gum up the works in some way. So I've seen something floated, for example, where it's like, well, we could impeach Bill Barr or we could impeach, Trump, and that would take precedent schedule wise. They would have to hold those hearings prior to a SCOTUS hearing. Okay, so let's say you do that. It's sort of like the gambit, though, of Republicans jamming this through is, do you then look like you're using constitutional gimmicks to hold things up? And does it make people angrier at the Democrats? Does it reinforce this notion that the Democrats are radical and that while Joe Biden is doing really well right now with independents and college-educated suburban voters, do people start to be like, I don't know, the Dems, they seem really crazy. Like that's sort of what I think the optics he's kind of hoping for.
But doesn't that depend on whether you do it during the lame duck or before the election? I mean, if you do it before the election, you set up emerged in corporeal form.
How are your tomatoes?
They're doing much better, actually. It's like the same amount of water, but more frequently, like the same over a day, but more frequently.
Cool.
So I actually got the first one that's not like split in 8 pieces. So thank you for your advice. Okay, sorry, I'm remembering what my question was. Something that I find very frustrating about the whole Supreme Court thing, which is just a very stylistic point, but it's still very frustrating, is why would you have, like, obviously they didn't know, setting the precedent on Garland, that they eventually have a similar chance later to do the same thing, to appoint someone in the last term. But why wouldn't they have said back then, we don't want to, we're not going to do it, and instead have to make up some weird precedent? Because if it would make, we don't want to, we're not going to, we want to, and we're going to do it because we can, it would be a lot easier to swallow if they. I
think this is a incredibly important question, but I want to amend it a little bit because it's much older than the Garland gambit and this gambit. At every stage, both parties, and the Democrats have blood on their hands on this too, have articulated in the language of principle acts of raw power grabbing.
Yeah.
Who's
And
that for?
I don't, so I actually
All
wrote a
principles,
piece.
not outcomes.
Yeah, there are no principles here. This is a raw power grab, but there's something that people feel inhibited about saying, I'm doing this based on the why dogs lick their balls principle, right? I'm doing it because I have the votes and might makes right. There's something really uncomfortable about saying that. And so people go through these contortions to dress up as principles. For example, to use a shoe on the other foot example, the Democrats ended the filibuster for lower court judicial nominations, but were outraged when Republicans ended the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations. There is no principal difference between the two. But people feel very strongly Harry Reid would never have gotten up on the Senate floor and say, look, we have the votes. We're going to force these people through. And we understand that when you have the votes, you're going to force your people through. And so, Mitch McConnell now goes through these contortions to explain some principle by which it is different depending on the party in question. It's not. I think the answer really is that it's just very uncomfortable to say, I'm doing this because I can. Sarah, what do you think?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that they had the votes last time, but they wanted to make a nice, eloquent pitch that, in fact, sounded like they were doing something magnanimous for the Republic or for the American people. We want the American people to have a voice. They should have a voice. It allows them to get up and sound self-righteous when they make their case about it. But now, in this particular case, because it's so clear and they're so on the record, now they're just saying, hey, you guys should have won the election. We've got the power. We've got the votes. We're going to do it.
And there's one important caveat or process point from that, which is expect that both sides will, in fact, use all the power that they have. I don't care what anybody says on the campaign trail about court packing. When the Democrats have the power to add seats to the Supreme Court, they will do it. And the reason they will do it is exactly the same reason as the reason McConnell is doing what he's doing now, which is a prisoner's dilemma, like certainty that if the other side were in the same position, they would do it. And so you have to preempt the other side. And so you do. So you take the moment when you've got it. And that creates, World War I. That's how World War I started. And it's, it's a well-studied effect in international relations. And I think it's been operative in the judicial confirmations wars for 25 to 30 years now.
Yeah, I actually think. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
No, you go ahead. Just since Republicans would tell you Bork was in the Hatfields and McCoy showdown on the courts, they would take Bork as the opening salvo of people behaving badly. That would be the argument. So go ahead.
I think that's right. But I think that as Ben says, that is the wrong tale to tell about the history of the court or the history of the courts in general. So listen, in the principal outcome balance, if you say if you're weighing which you're going to do, are you going to adhere to some principle of neutrality and procedure, or are you going to take this moment strategically and allow your party to benefit from the politics of it that are in your favor? It's kind of, it's like the court with the courts, the federal courts are these lifetime appointments. The outcome is such a hefty outcome, and winning on the principle or taking the principle is such an unsure bet of how that will ever turn out for you, what outcome that will ever pay off towards, except your own ability to maybe sleep at night, which I don't know many people in this business care about. And so I think that's kind of exactly what happens. And so it all becomes, I don't know, I honestly see this just constantly in the law generally, which is that you care about this is not just in selecting justices, this is in how you argue cases and like how you argue points of evidence and how you like pick juries is based on kind of very often the same, I think, wrong-handed principle of winning a case at any cost and occasionally abandoning principle or not being consistent in principle.
All right. David Batts, the floor is yours, with a different background.
He had this before. It's good.
No,
though.
I'm just like, I think we should expect David to have a different background every day.
I don't know how David gets backgrounds in Crowdcast. That's what I want to know. Like,
so there is some magic to it, Ben. I have a little present for you.
look, Ben.
It's a dog shirt.
It's a dog shirt.
Or is it a quote? Hard to tell.
That's pretty cool. How'd you do that?
That is really cool.
OBS is the bomb. So that way you can do whatever you want in your background, and it's super cool.
I'm gonna have to learn about OBS.
So,
but being able to have dog shirts in your background is super important in life. What's on your mind?
So Sarah, thanks so much. A couple of meta questions for you. One is, particularly in the, I'll call them former Republican vein, who do you see women's voices who all of us should be on the watch out for as people who used to be Republicans are like, what used to be a Republican does not make sense for me anymore, and I've got something to say about it. So what are some women's voices that we should be paying attention to? And then I want to ask you a little question about Bulwark Plus.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to the Bulwark Plus question for a shameless plug. But in terms of like never Trump, I mean, I'll tell you who one of my favorite, I've already mentioned her this time, but like Anne Applebaum is one of my favorite people to read. She is so smart. Her pieces in The Atlantic, and she's somebody who would have always been sort of a center-right voice. I think she would probably have considered herself more conservative. And she is like scary smart and so good. I read everything she writes. I 95% of the time agree with it. So I think watching her, and the thing that I like, and it sort of goes to something Kate just said, is that I'm always on the lookout in these moments. There's something about these raw power things that I hate. Like, I am looking for the people who want to de-escalate, who are looking for the reasons to try to find a path forward where we all remember that we are not on different sides of some war. Like, we're just Americans who are like making policy, and that there's plenty of room to compromise therein. And so one of the things I like about Anne so much is that I think she is deeply principled and like really wants to figure out, and she studies a lot of what's going on in Europe with populism, which I'm like now extremely interested in terms of how it's now sort of engulfing America. And I think that looking to her to understand what's going on with voters, and also thinking through, like, she's going to be one of the people who's thinking about the solutions to how you address this notion of being taken over by kind of nationalist, populist sentiment in this country.
And then with respect to the Bulwark Plus, it's a really interesting model, and I'm interested in your thoughts about what have you learned about the future of, I'll say it, monetization of podcasts, recognizing stuff costs money. We love Charlie, but you got to pay him. And what is the future in terms of podcasts? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that, thanks for the question. I mean, I think in terms of podcasts, it's like funny. It's like one of those areas where it's getting a little bit saturated. And so I think we were really lucky to have somebody like Charlie, who was like a longtime radio personality, who was really good at the format, to have host our anchor podcast, and then to have Mona Charen, who does her weekly roundtable. So I think like the future of podcasts, I'm worrying we're kind of hitting a limit. I mean, everyone I talk to now for every group of everything is like, let's start a podcast. That being said, like, there are really, really good ones, and there are ones like Lawfare podcast. ones that I look to that I'm just so excited about the format and the fact that it is easy to do because it gives really smart people the ability to rise to the top. But I'll tell you, just on the monetization piece, we launched the Bulwark about 2 years ago now, a little bit less, and it was really important to us not to have ads and not to have this cluttered, horrible experience. And I was able to raise money early on for the project, and frankly, I can still raise money for it. But it's actually extremely important to build a relationship with your audience in which they are paying at least on some level for, or supporting you on some level for the content. Like ours is meant to be a way to support the work that allows us to sustain over the long term. And the way that we did it was to say, we are not going to cut off content. The website is free. Charlie's podcast is free. Mona's podcast is still free. Like, the only thing that we have taken over to Bulwark Plus are the newsletters, which is another medium that's kind of exploding, but I think is a big future where you get individual personalities that have their own sort of newsletters. And then like the secret podcast, and then the other podcast that I do with Tim and JVL called Next Level. So we're trying to make the plus experience additive and not but let people have the regular content still for free. Because we want everybody to be able to access it, but we also needed to find a way to make the project sustaining long term.
It's kind of like Patreon, like the site that does for nonprofits, everyone finds out the content on Instagram or whatever eventually, but if you subscribe and give money with Patreon, you get to know it 5 days earlier, or get special little I don't know, whatever it is. I think it's actually a really smart model that doesn't privilege some people towards some information and others towards not having any information at all.
It has been a really interesting challenge for Lawfare over the years as well. We've and actually, candidly, one of the reasons I wanted to try in lieu of fun and to do it in the first place was to kind of road test. Could we create a product that was different from what we were doing on Lawfare, that Lawfare could kind of adopt a version of as a kind of premium product. And so one of my secret agendas with In Lieu of Fun was to try to road test some ideas for formatting for something like Lawfare Live, which was kind of going to be, and will be, and we will be announcing it soon, something like what Sarah and Charlie and JVL are doing with the secret podcast and these other newsletters that are available to Bulwark Plus subscribers, which you should all become. With my deep apologies to everybody who had trouble watching today for technical reasons, which were not the fault of the Wittis computer or internet bandwidth, as both of my co-panelists will attest. My presence here was fluid. It was never glitchy. I didn't freeze. My audio didn't go out. So if you all had problems seeing, I want you to tweet at CrowdcastHQ that they need to clean up their act.
Yes.
Because this was their fault, not ours. So yell at them. And I have written a note to Ann Applebaum suggesting that some night when she's going to be up late anyway, she should come hang out with us. Anne does live in Poland and sometimes in London, which makes it a little bit hard for her to do late night stuff. Anne was my next door neighbor for years at the Washington Post. We had adjacent editorial offices on the corridor, and we formed, and so, yeah, Anne was we do need to do a clever poll, don't we? So I'm going to do the poll while Kate talks for a minute and maybe talks us out.
Yeah, actually, Sarah, I was kind of thinking it's been 180 days that we've been doing this show. You've been on a number of times. It's been absolutely lovely. But I haven't heard like what your kind of pandemic story was. And like, or if you kind of had any type of thing. Do you remember what you were doing on like March 20? I think we started this March 22nd or March 24th. I'm just curious. Like, do you remember kind of what you were like? What was there anything in particular screeching to a halt?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just started a company. I just started Longwell Partners. I left the firm that I was with for over 15 years because it was becoming complicated for me now that I was a vocal dissident Republican to stay at a Republican firm. And so I'd started a company, and I had a lease, and I had an office space, and I had employees. And
really?
Yeah, so that was the thing. I will say I turned 40 on March 6th, and I went to Vegas on March 6th with all my best friends and my siblings, and had like a blowout, like did a lot of air guitaring on the street.
I thought you were going to say something very different with a did a lot of like sentence.
I did a lot of but like I had a great time. And then when I was there is when I was supposed to fly from there to California for a work trip and then come back. And it was just getting bad enough that like, I was like, maybe I shouldn't come. And the people were like, yeah, you shouldn't come. This is like, everything's getting sort of weird. And so I ended up coming home. And then like the news was breaking that like the next casino, one of the casinos like had, their first cases. And it was like, things were getting real. And I'm so always grateful that I got to get that trip in because it's like the last thing I did where I went anywhere or did anything.
I did something similar, like in mid-January, like flew to like Europe and presented like a paper. It was a whirlwind trip and I didn't get to have like a ton of fun, but I got to I went to Hamburg and I was in Berlin and I like got to go to London for a few days. And like, I'm like, oh man, I am so glad I like went to I'm like so glad that like I just did that one little thing before all of it kind of shut down. It's kind of crazy.
So Sarah, the poll is up. It is about what you should be drinking on election night.
Oh, what a good poll.
But here's the real question. The last question we're going to go out with is, what are you going to be doing on election night? And what will you be drinking, since it actually isn't up to our
Man, we should have a
readers?
Party. We should have a
we
party
are going to
with
have
all
in
of
lieu
our
of
friends.
We're going to have in lieu of fun at 5:00, of course.
But something, maybe it should go longer. And like maybe it should be like a thing, because I don't know. Are people going to be celebrating in person?
So this is
what are you going to do?
So I have not been. I don't go into the office very much, and some of the folks come in they live alone. Nobody who lives in a group house is allowed to come in, but I mostly don't come in. And so I am going to go though, be with all my people, all the people I've been working with on this project for the last. They've been tireless. Like, I don't know if everybody saw, but I meant to talk about it earlier, but we broke Olivia Troy, who was was the lead staffer on the COVID task force under Mike Pence. She's the third Trump official that Republican Voters Against Trump has helped release their story and go public. That's the big news that's how I wanted to answer your question about the big news that you missed, because the White House has been coming out attacking her, saying she's a liar. They are wrong. Kellogg said it from the podium today, said that she was fired. She was absolutely not. And so, just all these people that I've been doing all this work with, I want to be with them with masks, 6 feet apart, but with an old fashioned, which is my drink of choice. And because I'm a conservative, keep it old fashioned. And that's my plan.
Sarah Longwell, you were a
joke to close it out with. Too.
You are a great American. I will. We will have to discuss what the in lieu of fun plans are for election night. That is a great question, and we will discuss it. Our plans for tomorrow night, made during the pregame show this evening while we were waiting for Sarah, is that David Priest will be joining us. I love David too. And that will happen 22 hours and 56 minutes from now. And until then, Kate, we don't have fun anymore. We haven't had fun for 180 days, but we will have fun again. I promise. I just don't know when. Have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow.
All your shows, guys.